Hey, everybody, this is Eric with the Drum Addict. Thanks for stopping by for another episode of the Backbeat. Very excited today. I've got my friend Taison Wade from the UK with me. How are you, buddy?
I'm good, thank you.
So good to have you. And you were one of the first people to give our channel a shout out on
Yeah,
your channel.
and I think it also worked the other way for me as well. To be
Oh,
fair,
did it?
same as the same as Virtual Drummer said. Yeah, I think right in the early days it was you and Rich Raw Dog, or Raw Dog, however you say it. Yeah, so
Right.
you two, I think, were the first two to ever do that for me, and it really does help in the early days, doesn't it? Just having someone like on a bigger channel, because I think when you did it, I got about 15 to 16 subscribers, just like literally like that
Nice.
overnight, and yeah, and everyone like sort of commented, and it always works both ways, so it's always a really good sort of thing to do on YouTube.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I remember, one of the things you specifically said, because I loved it and I played it for Loretta, was how you were commenting on how Loretta would like get all up in my business with the camera, and you were like worried that she was gonna get hit.
Well, yeah, because that's the thing. A lot of drum covers, because I only started doing drum covers when COVID happened. I was performing live, and for a lot of drummers, like we were sort of going out performing. I found it really difficult in that March of 2020. I remember literally it was just completely everything stopped. And it took about 4 or 5 months for me to adjust to that. So I thought, well, I'm going to sort of carry on with a YouTube channel, and I thought I'll make drum covers. And I remember sort of having like one camera like on an iPhone in front of the kit, one behind it. And I thought, oh, this will be elaborate. I'll like swap between the cameras. That's going to look cool, sort of thing. It's like me like doing it in my head. But then again, when you sort of look at that, even that I found a little bit sort of, because it's static. Do you know what I mean? It's like when you're sort of like watching a live band and things like that, I tend to favor people who film with handheld cameras and things, because it's got that sort of real life motion to it. So yeah, so when I was doing like drum covers and things, even in the early days, I remember one camera would run out of memory, the other one would run out of battery and things like that. So then you'd only have one camera. So of course, I'll digress a lot in this, but yeah, when Loretta's obviously like really zooming in and stuff, it gave it a real sort of like what you'd get in a music video. Do you know what I mean? Sort of like it really, like, especially when you're sort of close to the drummer and you're sort of then pulling back and it's a different angle. It's a side that a lot of people and musicians and all that don't really get to see. Do you know what I mean? So it's a really, it
Right.
was quite a novel thing to watch when you were doing your videos. It was like quite unique. So yeah, I always liked that right from the start, like especially because I think it was one of the skillet ones you've done, like really like under one of the ride cymbals and in between the toms. It was such a good shot. And yeah, it's a really, really good way to do it. Yeah, I like that. So
Yeah, she's real
yeah.
creative. Like we're limited on space, so it really
Yeah.
pushes her creativity to the next level. Like, okay, what can I get over or under or around
Yeah.
to get a different shot? Yeah.
Yeah, because it's risky. That's the thing, isn't it? You go to do a role sort of thing. Yeah, you're like, yeah, I've hit plenty of cameras over time. Yeah,
Oh yeah, I have to be conscious of where she is, like where the camera
yeah,
is, because I've hit a cymbal and hit the camera, and so you do have to watch it. She has the audio going in her headphones, so she's
oh,
able
right,
to
okay.
to like kind of know what's kind of where we're going with stuff, and she
Yeah,
does a good job with it. But yeah, I remember that it was very, because you were very specific about like
yeah,
one of the things that I like is how Loretta's like, and she's not afraid to get up close in it. and
yeah,
um and
exactly.
that meant a lot to her. She was like, oh cool, somebody likes what I'm doing.
Yeah, because it's cool. Because I think what's good with the YouTube community, I mean, to be fair, in recent times, I've sort of come away a little bit from doing the drum covers. I mean, I've still got four, I think, from last March that I recorded. I've just not got around to finishing, and they're sort of just sitting on my hard drive. But it's a thing of, I think a lot of people that watch the videos really underestimate the work that goes into them. I mean, some of my drum covers took like 8 hours. And then when you watch some of them, I mean, one of my favorites, like coming up to the last year or so, was Virtua Drummers. He did like Town Called Malice by the Jam. And there was like ones where he had like the sort of dolly cameras and it was like it was moving around and stuff. And there's like, when you sort of see how everyone does it differently and the work that goes into it, I think it's quite, when you sort of like take a step back and think, they put a lot of work into this. And that's the thing, when you sort of approach it like that and you sort of explain to people, especially like drum students and stuff, I like sort of say, the work that goes into it, it gives a whole new level of appreciation, not just because you're playing songs that you like and you're sort of sharing that with the world, against YouTube's copyright system and stuff, but it's a thing of, you're actually putting out, a lot of hard work. And it's really cool to watch. I mean, right from the start, watching like Rich Raw Dog and sort of drums by Ash Wells, everyone from the start, it's been great watching all these drummers like sort of do different things and get better and better with their videos. Yeah, it's really cool,
Yeah, and how they've kind of evolved, from their inception to where they are now with either audio and or the way they're filming their stuff, the way they're editing. It's so neat to see that. Now you said we're going to get out of order here a little bit, but that's okay. You said you were talking about how you hadn't done some covers in a while, but that's because you've been doing a lot of live playing. Tell me about that.
That's it. Yeah. Well, that was the thing. I kind of when March come round, I was sort of looking to put together my own project. I wanted to put a band together that was doing mainly covers like punk, ska, new wave, mod revival, all that sort of stuff. And then out of the blue, I just had an email from a band called Jack the Lad, which were like an originals band from not far from where I live. And they just sort of said, "Oh, is that you drumming on YouTube in one of my videos?" And I was like, "Yeah," that sort of thing. The guy's quite like bizarre, so he knows it. But yeah, and I sort of said, "Yeah," and he said, he said, "You can drum for us," and I was like, "Okay." And he literally just said, he said, "You got an audition in 2 weeks," and I was like, "Right." Just come out of absolutely nowhere. Like I think it was on Valentine's Day of all days, just this random email. And I went for this audition on the 6th. And I only had the songs to listen to. I think it was like 2 hours of the things. He said, "Yeah," he said, "You're drumming for us." He said, "You've got to do a gig in like 2 weeks at like Norwich." And literally just like that, completely changed. It was really and the thing is, what was weird about it is with Jack the Lad, it was a thing where we were like supporting other artists and stuff. It was a thing of using their own equipment. You had to like sort of just bring what they call breakables, cymbals, bass drum pedal, stall, for some reason, snares and things like that, just that sort of equipment. So it was literally a thing, you put your equipment on, you drummed, you done your set, and then you had to take it all off and let the next band go on. It was a complete 180 to what I was used to in like a covers band. When you'd sort of like set up and you'd wait around for like 2 hours waiting for the band to start, and then you'd play, you'd have a break, play, and then you'd just sort of pack away and go home. That sort of thing, like you do in a pub or a club. This was like the complete opposite. It was a really strange situation, and we just started doing these really big gigs. And because of that, my covers band, like I was trying to put together, sort of had to go a little bit on the back burner. But sure. This was right when I was doing drum covers. I went to the studio a week after I'd done that Jack the Lad gig, and I record, because what I do, I go to an external studio to record them. And I usually sit down, I record about 10 covers in 4 hours. It costs about £60 just to like book the hall or the studio, and like you just sort of like play the songs, do 2 takes for each one, and then just go home, and then you've got all the footage. So when that was done, they just sort of, I think I put 6 out and there's just 4 remaining. So just because of the live performances and putting together this other project, which has now come to fruition, just like completely took over. It's weird how like 1 week, you're sort of sitting there like on a Saturday night, not really doing a lot. And then the next, it's like you're sort of back out there again. Really strange how quick it can happen. So any sort of musicians who are struggling, who like want to try and get back in there, it can change so quickly. Do you know what I mean? Just out of nowhere, you just have someone reach out to you on a day where you're sort of feeling a bit fed up or whatever. And it's really strange. But
and because you were making YouTube videos, this band found you.
Yeah, he found the video "New Rose" by The Damned, just a video of me drumming. It was the way he said, "Is that you drumming?" It was like, my name, Taison Wade. He's a funny guy, do you know what I mean? I was like, but and he sent, and what was weird, I'd seen one of their videos about 3 years prior, so I knew of them, and they just said they wanted a new drummer just to sort of fill in their sound. I'm quite a punk, quite a raw punk drummer at heart, so I think that sort of really fitted in with their sound. And they're recording their next album as well, so they wanted some new material for that. So it all just sort of really blended in. But nice. Like I said, it just sort of come out of nowhere, to be fair. So my drum covers for now have just took a real back seat. It's a bit of a shame, really. I think I will try and make some time to finish them, because to be fair, on YouTube, they're one of the best things to get interaction with, because I used to make them for drum students. There'd be certain requests people would ask for. Like one of my drum students would he asked for Personal Jesus by Depeche Mode, for example, and it's like that was a really fun one to try because it's all on the toms, do you know what I mean? So you'd always get a curveball one, and it used to be really fun to like approach that. As you probably find with yourself with requests and stuff, it's like you know, it's nice to always try new things. It's like I saw your video, the Wanted Dead or Alive one, which was great. Do you know what I mean? That was really good. That
Oh, thanks, man.
because that's one of my favorite Bon Jovi songs. So that was really, really good to watch. And yeah, because like when you sort of see videos like that, that's what I mean. When you've got it from like another angle and other people are watching it, that's when you're sort of then getting all the comments and things like that. That side of YouTube, you can get a lot of interaction. Whereas with live performances, when I've just got a camera behind the kit or things like that, you don't get as much. That's why I kind of appreciate what Sasha does with Virtual Drummer, with what he does when he done them vlogs, when he was like sort of traveling in the car, even had it at the petrol station. It's like, I like when people on YouTube like have a real novel approach to what they do. And it shows a real love for the art as well, because drumming doesn't just have to be about sitting behind the kit. You know, it can be literally leading up to it. It can be like where you stop off to get McDonald's. It can be like when you actually go to the venue and you're setting up and you've got all this space and the guitarist is like encroaching on where your drums go and stuff. It's all part of the experience. Do you know what I mean? And
Right.
it's a really, really nice thing to watch. Do you know what I mean? So that's the thing with it. Like I said, with YouTube, there's so many different sides of it. And drum covers, I think it always remains probably a flagship for most content creators, just because of like the professionalism they can add to it and the fact that they can interact with their audience better. So yeah,
absolutely.
Basically, I should be doing it a bit more. So
well, but when you're playing out, and there's a couple other guys that I'm friends with that you know were putting out tons and tons of drum covers, and now they're playing with 2 or 3 different bands. Well, that is the time priority. You know, I mean, that's you know, it's usually a paying gig. So you go where that is, you know. Now, tell me about Wake the Nation. Is that right?
Wake Up. Yeah, so Wake Up the Nation's the project I put together in, it was about March. I started like feeling out for different musicians and things. In May, I was incredibly lucky to find a guitarist called Rob, who's our singer and guitarist now. And what's weird about Rob is he's, I don't like to ever say he is just like Paul Weller from The Jam, but he's just like Paul Weller from The Jam. Literally, when he sings, it's like, what's interesting about him, he really does sound like him, but he's not trying to be him, if that makes sense. He's obviously a big fan of The Jam. But when he sings other stuff, whether it's Big Country, whether it's sort of The Clash, Stiff Little Fingers, all them sort of punk bands and things, he still retains his feeling to it and that sort of identity. So even though he does have that sort of, because everyone says, oh, he's just like Paul Weller, but he carries that over, that individualism. So it's a really nice thing to have for the band. He's certainly the gimmick. Do you know what I mean? In the nicest way possible. Do you know what I mean? When anyone sees him, yeah, he really sort of sets it off. We found our bass player in the August. And interesting enough, who's in a band called, I always forget the band's name. I knew you said The Commitments. That's not The Commitments. That's the band from, no, that's not them. Collectors, that's it. Yeah, he was in the band called The Collectors, a mod revival band that quite popular around my neck of the woods. And I remember he phoned me up. I put an advert up on a place called Join My Band. I don't know if you have that in America, but it's just a literal, like a sort of classifieds for musicians looking for members. And he got in touch. He said, I'm in a band called The Collectors. He said, they're splitting up soon. I was like, oh, you're like, brilliant. Do you know what I mean? And I knew exactly who he was. And we'd done the audition with him and he was just absolutely fantastic. Because we wanted to have a 3-piece, mainly because when you have a 3-piece, I know it sounds a little bit like sort of diplomatic, I suppose, but when you do have 3 members, number one, you have the thing of like there's no real hierarchy in a band. You just sort of have the drummer, bass guitar, vocals, and lead. There's one less person to like sort of have issues with dates when you're booking. There's one less person to have an argument with if something's going wrong. Sometimes that's a good way to look at it, but also at the same time, that's one less person you have to gel with. You can kind of read each other really, really well. So from that perspective, we all sort of agreed a 3-piece, you know, and also financially. So, but yeah, if you've got like a 3-piece, you can really get on and create quite a good friendship. I've been in 3-pieces before and it just really works. So we sort of agreed, you know, even with the sacrifice of probably having a keyboard player or a rhythm guitarist, we sort of thought, we'll try it as a 3-piece, just see how it goes. And yeah, luckily we sort of tied together like 50 songs in the set and it's just worked great. We had our first performance the 25th of March. That was at a little pub in the border of Suffolk, one of the counties near, not far from where I live, because I live roughly about 40 or so miles from London. northeast London roughly. So yeah, this is like sort of going up a bit more north, and yeah, just a small pub, but we absolutely filled it out. It was great, and we've got our next gig in 2 nights on Saturday. Place called the Pickerel. I've gigged there for years. You're talking since like 2008, so I'm really looking forward to going there.
Nice.
Yeah, my girlfriend's seeing me there for the first time with Wake Up the Nations. That's going to be really good. I've got all my drum students going. Yeah,
Oh, cool.
it's just it's really cool because with a covers band, it's very similar to when you're saying about like drum covers on YouTube. There's a certain thing for covers when you play them in a band because it's like, Jack the Lad, we do originals. It's appealing more to a subculture, that sort of punk vibe of the late 70s, early 80s. Whereas when you've got sort of covers, people actually know the songs off by heart. So they're going to be the ones dancing in the crowd. If you turn around and say, oh, we're going to do Friday, I'm in Love by The Cure, or you say, oh, we're going to do something, like Town Called Malice by The Jam, they're going to go, oh, and they're going to be up and dancing, the Kinks, like all them sort of bands, they're going to know who they are. And it's a really rewarding thing to see when people get up and dance to those songs that they grew up with. I mean, I was born in 89, so it's obviously a time period I missed, but it's a thing of those songs mean a lot to those people. You're kind of keeping it alive in a way. So it's a really nice sort of thing to experience as a drummer. You're sort of watching, especially because that's another thing with a three piece, because you're in that sort of triangle formation, which sounds really formal, but you sort of got the drummer there, guitarist, bassist. You can always see the crowd. If you've got a singer in front of you as a drummer, you can never ever see what's going on in the crowd. You've always got some sweaty singer literally jumping up and down in front of you. So when you've got that sort of three-piece dynamic, you can always see the crowd, and it's a really great feeling to actually watch people interact with your music. And to be fair, that's the good thing with a covers band. It's a complete other side of the coin. And that's one thing, like, always when I said about like Virtua Drummer, it's the drummer I want to go and see live at some point. A couple of my students want to go and see him because he plays a lot of covers as well. And you can relate to that because you know the songs. If he was to turn around and say, oh, we're doing Hold the Line by Toto, you're going to go, oh, it's like, it's familiar. Do you know what I mean? And it's cool to see how that band's going to do their take on it as well. So right. Yeah, it's a really cool thing. Do you know what I mean? But
that's very cool. That's very cool. Now, kind of moving backwards?
Yeah.
What got you into playing the drums?
It's a weird one because I remember I spoke to Brian Gribbin about this. It was a long time ago. When originally my friend Daniel was quite a big part of my life. He was a guitarist. He had cystic fibrosis, and he was like putting a band together when he was 13. We were like friends at school, and he said, "Oh, do you want to be a part of my band?" And I said, "Yeah, okay." And I think I was trying to be a singer at first point, and then he said about being a bass player, and then he said, "How about drums?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't know, really. Like, I never really had any interest in it or anything." I was about 15 at the time, I suppose, and his brother had a drum kit, and I remember it was a Silver Stag. And like Stag, like it was quite, you're talking like sprayed on paint sort of job. Do you know what I mean? Quite cheap. And I remember it was his brother's, and I was like playing it. We're doing "We Will Rock You" by Queen, and you're talking the most simple thing, just racked on floor and onto the snare, And I remember just sort of playing it, and I sort of got quite a liking for it, and I just sort of got a little bit more into it. And I remember I got a Mapex VX series. Black it was made of basswood, like not very sort of decent. It was one of the wrapped finishes before they started painting the actual shells. So yeah, when like after a couple of years it started to fall apart, all the shells started to split. And but yeah, it was great beginner's drum kit, do you know what I mean? So I sort of carried on with that for a few years, and I got in a 60s band, and things just went on from there. Daniel sadly got iller and iller, so it was a thing he couldn't really sort of carry on. But I remember saying in the Brian Gribbin interview, he passed away when he was 21.
Oh, and, no, sorry.
Sorry, before his 21st birthday he passed away. It was really sad because I always sort of think back to him a lot of the time, and it's like, because I would never have got into drums if it weren't for him. Yeah. It was a thing of like, he just sort of pushed me in that direction. So it's like, I remember like every sort of year that comes around, you sort of sit there and you have to take a moment to think like, my life would be so different. Because that's the thing, when I sort of then got into like a 60s band, I mean, you're talking the Trogs, the Searchers, all that. So it was not stuff I really liked. I mean, it's stuff that you're talking my timing was well on point for it. That really sort of helped get me like the timing and sort of things like that, because it was so basic, you had to really sort of concentrate with it. you weren't allowed to do fills. Do you know what I mean? That sort of thing. So yeah, with all that sort of thing, it was a case of he sort of like followed that, and sadly he just got iller and iller, and it's just weird how sort of when you say like how'd you get into drums, you always sort of like think back to that and think, like it's really weird like how one person can completely shape your life and they don't even know it. Do you know what I mean?
You didn't know it at the time either.
No.
So
really strange, isn't it? Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. You never know. One moment, one small moment in the scope of a life.
Yeah, exactly.
Changed everything. That's so
exactly,
cool.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, what a blessing it was to have that guy come into that was your friend, to be like, hey, I mean, that's when I look back on things and people that I've lost, I try to hang on to those things. I'm like, man, I'm so thankful for this time and what it did for me here and here. That's so cool, man. What a unique story too. Usually it's like my dad was a drummer, or for me it was like a kid in school that was like the coolest dude I knew, and he played drums, but that's so neat. And then you've been playing ever since. Yeah,
because it was a thing of what was cool about Daniel. He was, to this day, probably still one of the nicest people I'd ever met. Do you know what I mean? Because with cystic fibrosis, he obviously had a lot going on behind the scenes. There was a lot of times when he wasn't at school, but he'd disappear for like 20, 30 minutes and he'd like come back into the classroom. You'd never know like if he'd been ill or anything like that, or if like he had to go somewhere. But he'd come in, but he'd always be smiling and he'd always be laughing and things like that. He was a really big fan of Iron Maiden and things like that. And he'd just come back in, he'd put like the Dance of Death album on, which was new at the time. And it would be like he literally nothing in the world mattered, like other than music and our friendship. And it's a really, really rare trait to have in a friend or just a person in general.
Yeah.
So when we like he said about getting in a band, he played guitar like just, he had, I think it was a BC Rich he had. And he just like sort of said, would you like to sort of join the band? And like, it was only sort of a kid's project sort of thing at the time, but it was nice to sort of have that go from strength to strength, enough for me to get a drum kit and then to get a Roland electric drum kit and to like pursue it. And I think as like he obviously got iller and iller, I think it was a nice thing for him to see that I did try and push it, and he was really supportive of it. Do you know what I mean? When I got into my blues band in 2008, he was like, oh, that's really cool. Do you know what I mean? And he knew that he couldn't. And I found that quite difficult because obviously I wanted him to be able to do what he wanted to do. He wanted to go out and probably gig and things, and I know he couldn't. But it was quite sad, really. He was just a lovely guy. Do you know what I mean? But it's people like him who make the world better. Do you know what I mean? So
100%.
For the time he was here, do you know what I mean? Yeah, I think about him every day. Do you know what I mean? It's like you can't not really. Do you know what I mean? It's like
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I totally understand exactly what you're saying. It's hard to move on from that too, because we could spend time just talking about those kinds of relationships with people and honoring them by moving forward and doing what you're doing, to the best of your ability. And I think that's the best way we can honor people that have influenced our lives like that and have gone is to do the things that we're passionate about, and find a way to use those and to be the kind of people that they were and try to make the world around us, a better place, So yeah, there's no way to segue out of this, but so we'll just do a hard stop. Tell me about what you're playing gear wise.
So that, to be fair, that it's a real sort of go with the flow thing at the moment. Mainly because of like how things went last year. I mean, it's kind of a weird one because it's like at the start of last January, I was in quite a bad place. My covers band, we'd sort of like split up and gone our separate ways. We didn't really sort of gel after COVID and things. And I remember sort of sitting there in the January and I didn't really have a lot of direction with me drumming. I knew I wanted to start my business up with tuition, but I also wanted to be in a band. So it was a thing of, when I now look back and you sort of think where things have gone now, like I'm in two bands, sort of my tuition business is thriving. Yeah, it's kind of a weird one. I sort of tend to just go with the flow. And one example is it's like last year I bought a Premiere drum kit, for example, and I always sort of joke to myself because there was two rules I always had for life, and it was one of them was to never own a Ford Fiesta and to never have a red drum kit. And I did both of them, literally both of them in the same year. And it's not because I don't like red drum kits, but it's because it was a thing of you see a lot of red drum kits about, and they look awesome on stage. And I always like to sort of go for something a bit different. And it's like your drum kit, for example. I mean, I've seen that in your videos because it's like that satin red, isn't it? The Evolution satin, isn't it? Yeah, and it's such a cool color. Do you know what I mean? But as soon as I got that Premiere drum kit, because it matches the whole mod revival theme. Do you know what I mean? And
Right.
because of that, I wanted it to sort of I had a choice between that or translucent black, and I thought, no, the red is going to look really good. But it was quite an impulse decision, and I'll tell you, it was such a nice color. The videos and pictures, they do it no justice at all. You see it on stage, and you see it just like sort of when the sun catches it, if it's coming in through the studio window, and it's the richest, loveliest red. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, yeah, and it's like that's what I mean, because it was so impulsive. Yeah, it's just like one of those things. Yeah, I tend to like be a bit like that with my drumming. Like if a gig comes in, like the guys are like, "Oh, do you want to do it?" And it's like, yeah, you just sort of literally just take whatever like sort of comes along. Yeah, it sort of suits me, to be fair. Yeah, so I tend to not really have much of a plan. I just sort of try and go with the flow with it. Yeah, so
gotcha. Now before that, you were playing a Mapex kit, right? It was that kind of like green.
That's it.
Color was so pretty. Yeah. How do those two kits compare?
So yeah, I've still got the Mapex. I have it stacked in my studio, mainly because of it's done a lot of gigs, and I have to be honest. Considering my first Mapex, like I said, it was a VX series. It was. I mean, I have to be honest. I regret selling it. They always say don't ever sell instruments and stuff. Yeah, totally regret that. I think I sold it for like £200 to a dealer, and I never know where it went. Probably some rehearsal hall somewhere. Yeah. Yeah, quite sentimental still. But the thing is, with that kit, it was March of 2008. It was purchased, Black Forest Green, and it's quite. I don't think it was an uncommon color, but it was one of their premium sort of ranges. Mapex did. They did it in sapphire, like this red fade. And yeah, I wanted something that was sort of relatively affordable. I think it was about £630, which for at the time, including hardware and a snare and all that sort of stuff, you even got a pedal. Pretty reasonable. So you always get the basic heads. So I remember I put some Evans EC2s on it. And it was an absolutely great drum kit. And I pretty much always saved up for a Saturn series to always have as my personal kit, because I love Saturn series kits. Even when they had the Orion, I always preferred the sound of a Saturn series. You always heard them in like clubs and stuff mic'd up, and they just sounded really good. Do you know what I mean? Like, and they also looked the part as well. They had a lot more sparkle finishes and things rather than the natural lacquer. And just really liked them. And it was a thing of just never quite got around to getting one. So I always kept that Mapex, mainly because with pub and club gigs, I tend to worry about the equipment, like when it's on stage and stuff like that. You always worry. It's happened a few times. People will spill pints of Guinness over it. They will get on the stage and lean on it and fall over. Guitar leads hit it and ding it. Do you know what I mean? It happens. Do you know what I mean? So I've always been wary of having an expensive drum set for that reason. And I kind of have that whole philosophy of if it does get a few marks and chips in it, it's kind of part of its history. Mm-hmm. However, it's obviously a little bit more bearable when that instrument isn't like massively expensive. Do you know what I mean? It's like right. It's like when both of my guitarists, like the bass player and the guitarist, have both got Rickenbackers, but you're talking they're both like £3,000 each. Do you know what I mean? It's like I don't think I could do that. Do you know what I mean? The drum set, yeah, it sort of worries me a bit. So so it's kind of always that reason. I've always just kept the Birch kit. And so that was why I got the Premiere as well. I looked secondhand and I thought, you know what? They're going for like £350, £400 on eBay. Gear for Music, I put a video up recently. I said it was $499. I think it was actually $599, the kit. But with that, though, it like sort of, you're talking the same as the Mapex Birch shells. I think they're 6-ply rather than 8. I'm not 100%, but I have to say the sound of it's got a lot snappier sort of sound. Both kits use Remo Emperors on the toms. I've kept for now on the Premiere. It's got the original resonators on it. I probably will swap them out at some point. Might be why, but because they were quite bad. The top heads on it, they were unbranded, so you can imagine how bad they were.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I've not actually put the other heads on the bottom yet. I want to sort that out at some point. But yeah, it's got a really nice sound to it. Like, especially in a pub, I had someone else like try it out, and it sounds really sort of got a proper snap to it. Do you know what I mean? And because it's birch, it's sort of also got that kind of smoothness as well.
Right.
Yeah, really like it. I pair it with I got a Mapex Black Panther Metallion last year. I absolutely love that. It's you know, the brass one.
Yes.
Yeah,
And I think you
phenomenal
posted
snare
pictures
drummer.
of it too. It's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's so nice. Yeah. I mean, yeah, when I got that, I mean, I mainly got that for like the more festival gigs, do you know what I mean? The bigger stages and things, so it could be mic'd up. But literally, when you hit it, like the bloke said, oh, you got to turn the mics off when you're hitting it. And it's like, literally, the mics were off. It's like that powerful. Like, I sort of hit it like that, and it's like the crack it's got behind it. It's like gunfire when you play it.
That's
But
awesome.
yeah, it sounds really good. I put a controlled sound on it just to give it a bit more durability, and I tune it relatively tight. Do you know what I mean? It sounds, yeah, still trying to find my sound with it. You know how you do with snares. Do you know what I mean?
Oh,
Try and find that right sound. Yeah, get in there. Do you know what I mean? But for the most part, it's a fantastic instrument. It really works well with the birch kits. Yeah, and it also looks the part as well because it's like that nice golden color. Yeah, it's great.
Right.
Yeah, I really love that. But
yeah, it's beautiful. I've never owned a Black Panther or Mapex metal snare. Well, that's not true. I have like a 6x10 steel Mapex snare that's like an auxiliary thing. But I got my buddy Marcus Drums has probably 2 or 3 different like Mapex metals, metal snares, brass snares, and he loves them. He loves them.
They're really, the build quality on them as well. I mean, the only weird thing about it is the snare lugs are offset. So you have one there, like, and they stagger them. They're not actually equal to each other.
Gotcha.
So of course it can be quite hard swapping it out on stands when you're sort of like putting it, quickly. You've got to like put it on a snare stand on a dark stage. It can be a bit awkward to center it at times. Aside from that, quite odd design choice. Yeah, it's really, really good. It's got like sort of each side it's got the drop switch, and you can actually tighten it up either side, like if you need to like get the snares actually balanced properly. Yeah, you can get your sound really like just how you want it. Like I said, I think that's the thing, you've got so much control over it. It's about actually finding that sweet spot for it. But no, it's absolutely great. Yeah, no, I really like it. Because like that's the first time I've ever bought like a proper snare drum. I always used the one that come with the Mapex kit. Mainly just for convenience. Do you know what I mean? It was exactly the same size as well as the Metallion, my birch one. It was a 14 by 5.5. And yeah, to be fair, I always used to get a pretty good sound out of it. It used to blend well. And I think it depends as well what you're actually using it for. Because when we're recording the Jack the Lad album, we tried using the Metallion for using the recording, and we just could not get a sound out of it. I tried tuning it everywhere, and it would just, because it's brass, all it would do is buzz. Do you know what I mean? And we didn't have the time to mess around. So straight away we said, oh, just use the wooden one, the birch snare for me Mapex. We used that and it worked great and it sounded really good. Whereas live, it just doesn't cut it in the same way. So that's the thing with snares and drums, isn't it? You have also, because I mean, I will be honest, when it comes to sort of like, tuning and things like that, I'm not the most precise at drummers. Do you know what I mean? I just like to sort of have a drum, tune it, and it sound good. Do you know what I mean? I'm not that 100% like getting the perfect sound. Do you know what I mean? So,
but you like it, and it works for what you're.
That's exactly it. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So tell me about your teaching, Taison Wade drum tuition, right? Is that what you?
Yeah. So I've always wanted to sort of get into that side of it, mainly because I love drumming so much. It's a thing of, like over the years, just sort of got more and more into it. I've developed my own style. And it was always a thing when I was like sort of at gigs and performances, it was kind of odd because you'd get so many people just come up and say, do you teach? And I was like, no. And it would start to become more and more of a regular thing. And at the time, I remember like someone sort of said to me, they said like, do you know what? They said, you should really be doing this. Like, and I sort of sat there and thought, well, maybe I will. Do you know what I mean? And literally it was right before COVID started that I was like getting the ball rolling. Of course, then that come about. And so I did make the thing of once COVID was over, like sort of had my studio sorted out. And I just sort of went with it. I've got, because one of the things that a lot of these people I found that were interested in tuition, a lot of them weren't interested like in notation. And I tend to be one of those drummers who I tend to use notation as a technique to like show people visually how to play something on the drums. I've used notation before. It's quite a good way to sort of learn the song off by heart, beat for beat, and obviously things like that. But there's a lot of people out there who also said, look, I just want to learn it by memory. I want to know how to play drum groove so I can go to a jam night and just play with some musicians at a pub. And that's the thing. I started to like sort of say, you know, to a lot of those people, yeah, that's totally fine. We can do that. And a lot of those students have been like sort of, you know, they're more people in their 50s up to 70. And yeah, they've absolutely loved it. Do you know what I mean? That's been one of, strangely enough, one of my unique selling points, which I really wasn't expecting. I was expecting a lot of people, because obviously it's like the whole rock school thing. A lot of people do like to do things by the book. It's a good way to obviously do it. Do you know what I mean? Because you know, it will obviously give drummers an insight into how to play songs correctly, especially, let's just say something like, you know, Two Princes, Spin Doctors, for example, that intro lick, you know, sort of chop on the snare. Do you know what I mean? When you've got the sort of the doubles and things like that. You know, if you were to play that non-correctly, for example, just from memory, it's obviously not going to sound the same as what the original drummer intended. Certain things can be sort of, you know, they have to be played the same. Whereas if you had a song like Teenage Kicks by the Undertones, it can be played in a standard sort of 8-beat groove, you know, kick and snare, or you can then alter that around. You can make it, you know, like into 2/4. You can also play it with a bit more kick drum, you know, depending on if you want to follow the basses lick and like have a bit more following the melody. You can sort of mix it up a little bit. Do you know what I mean? So I was like, sort of, that's one of the things I sort of go with. I try and show drummers how to perform live, you know, as opposed to sort of maybe playing like a studio, like a recording, things like that, you know, just showing the pros and cons to both, because there's two sides to it, really.
Sure.
You know, and that's the cool thing about it. You know, if you sort of look at it in that way, and it's been quite a successful strategy, really, to be fair. A lot of the drummers I've taught are all sort of getting into being in bands. One of my favorite students, one of my friends who's like first students is called Andy. And funny enough, he only lives around the corner. And he found me on Facebook, and we started like sort of chatting about drums and things. And yeah, he's like built his drumming up over the last year with me, sort of practicing not just the work I've done, but also he's put in a lot of work behind the scenes. He loves it, you know, in between his own work. And yeah, he's literally on the point of like being able to start up a band and like go out and drum. Yeah, he's in his early 50s. And yeah, it's absolutely fascinating to watch. You know, when I sometimes like say to him, I said, right, put a song on. I think like the other day, randomly picked an Elton John song. I said, right, I said, you're going to drum to that. And he drums it, but he gets all the fills like correctly. He does all these spontaneous fills, some of them in 4s, 3s, and he does it. And it's like, it's really satisfying to watch, because it's not, like I said, just what I've taught. It's the fact he's developed that intuition, and he's sort of got that live drummer flair. Do you know what I mean? And it's been a roller coaster, because obviously when you think about teaching, you kind of just think, right, it's going to be 2 hours. You're just going to sit there. You're going to like teach these people something. They're going to come back in a couple of weeks, learn something else. It's weird how much they develop like as musicians over time. It's a really, really cool feeling. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, awesome. I'm so like, yeah, I'm really like, all my students are about 15 to 16 on the books now. And it's like, I'm so proud of each and every one of them. Like they range from the age of 5 right up to 73. And you just know, like, yeah, and you watch them like every week getting better and better, you know, and it's like all, you know, all the parents sort of like come along and watch, and they see like their kids getting better at drumming. And you also get people, you know, like I said, who are in their 50s, who have their like sort of kids and stuff like supporting them, who are in their sort of like, you know, teens up to their 20s. And they're like saying, oh, my dad's like learning an instrument. It's really cool. Do you know what I mean? It's like to see these people, and I'm not even, you know, for me, I don't charge like a really high rate for drumming. I try and keep it quite reasonable, because the way I look at it, since it is a living, I would rather have more students on my books than I would to actually charge a higher premium and not get to teach, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
I know that's kind of not how life works, but at the same time, I love doing it. And it's like to have that sort of feedback when, you know, you sort of finish a lesson and you sort of come in and have a cup of tea, and it's like you just sort of think, you know, wow, like that, you know, like, and people like say, how did that go? And it's like they're phenomenal. Like watching them drum and like get better and better. And
I love
and
it.
the thing is, what's kind of cool is you see some of these 8-year-olds, and it's weird because some of them, I often think like, Ruby C Drummer.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I'll like watch her quite a lot on YouTube. She's very talented. And you kind of see, youngsters like that. And some of them, like one of them's called Jack, and he's only 9. And you watch him drum, and full well by the time he's 14, 15, he'll be able to outplay me. Like, and you can just see the way, and it. And the thing is, you feel like this real sort of drive to like make them like that. It's like it's a really cool sort of feeling to know that they've got their whole life ahead of them. And you're sitting there and you're watching them drum, and it's like they don't even know it. And it's such a cool feeling. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, I absolutely love it. Do you know what I mean? It's really, really cool to watch these students like get better and better. And even though you're sort of a big part of that, deep down that you're not always the biggest part of that. It's them who are doing the hard work, and they're the ones that are going to push it. Yeah, it's a great feeling, Eric. It really is. Yeah.
Yeah, you can make it fun and engaging, but if at the end of the day, if they don't want to put the effort into it, they're not going to progress. So when they take an interest and are putting the effort in, I've not taught in forever. It's something that actually I've thought about trying to get back into. I need a little different space than this. But I want to talk about just briefly one of your students who I'm friends with via Facebook and Instagram is Traveling Underpants. And it seems like one of the bonus things about connecting with him is that he is an amazing cook. That's a great perk, I would say.
Yeah, yeah, he's great. Yeah, because he supports. Obviously, I keep him nameless, but it's a thing of he supports. He comes to gigs and things like that. We started because funny enough, he met me through YouTube. It was at a time I was using Google's ad credits, when they like said you can have like 75 ad credits if you like advertise and all that sort of stuff. And I remember I was boosting some of my YouTube videos, my early covers, and he happened to be one of the people who commented, and we just got talking like in the comments, and I found out he lived roughly about 10 to 15 miles from where I do. The UK is a really small place when you think about it. It's like when Virtual Drum was saying he got his drum kit from sort of Portsmouth. That's like where my girlfriend lives. Yeah, small world, you know what I mean? And so when like he was sort of saying about he was like, not far from me, I sort of said, like, would you be interested in drum lessons? I said you can have a free one on the house sort of thing. This was like when I started getting into it again. And he said, yeah. And of course, he come along and he really took to it. And he sort of each and every lesson, he sort of got more and more into it. And he started coming to gigs. He's seen Jack the Lad, he's seen Wake Up the Nation. It's become a real community thing. Do you know what I mean? Even with the parents as well. It's like, so he's obviously met, like I said, about Andy, and like people like that. And everyone's sort of like connected and become friends. And that's what I mean. He now invites us over for dinner. We sort of go over and have food. Awesome. And it's a real nice thing because then afterwards we just go up and like sort of play on his electric drum kit. He's got an Alesis one. And every time I play it, the snare pad moves down like that because I always hit it too hard because obviously quite used to hitting the snare hard, and like
cranking those butterfly nuts down, right? Like
literally, and no, it's great. Do you know what I mean? We have such a good time, sort of, and
I love it.
Yeah, it's nice. He sort of come out his show. I think later down the line, we're going to start doing videos, like student videos on my channel, where like people do covers and things. We're going to sort of see how that goes. Obviously, the production's quite a tricky thing to do because of the time, right? Just working it out and things. Especially like in the early days, it's quite because that's the thing. Like, one of the sort of things we were discussing with the students is like, would we leave mistakes in, or would you want them like sort of omitted? It's a kind of a weird one, isn't it? Because mistakes happen. I mean, I'll be honest, when I perform, I make quite a few mistakes. You're talking 4 or 5 mistakes that I would consider noticeable because it happens live. Do you know what I mean? It's a live performance. Our guitarist makes mistakes. The bass player makes mistakes. It's part of being live. When I saw, sort of Iron Maiden back in, it was 2016, 2017, they make mistakes on stage. It happens. You know what I mean? It's like no one's perfect. So when you've got that philosophy, it's kind of at the same time, when I make a drum cover, I tend to, if obviously there was a mistake in it, I would try and sort of do another take. Do you know what I mean? So it's a kind of a weird one with students because at that point, if they're sort of early on, do you leave the mistakes in? Do you omit them? It's sort of one thing we're trying to discuss at the moment. So it's a bit of a grey area, really. But at the same time, it's still nice for them to get that sort of satisfaction of having their content online. So yeah, I think it's something to work towards. Yeah, because some of them are getting so good now that I mean, you're talking they can play seamlessly now. So it's a thing of I think that'd be a good one to start pushing. To be fair, yeah,
that's awesome. So what's in the future for Taison Wade and for his YouTube, his bands, and his teaching? What's coming down the road?
So I think, to be honest, as we said earlier, I think as I'm taking things as it comes, I think I want to try and focus a bit more on my YouTube channel. I have mentioned to my students about, I said I'd book a place to record drum covers. I have mentioned to them it would be cool to like do the same thing, but let them all go there and have like a bit of a go on like my drum set, probably book it over like 2 days or something, so everyone can have a go and maybe do some recording that way. I reckon that'd be good for my channel because I want to try and keep that community part alive. One reason I'm not very active in comments anymore, because I watch everybody's videos. You know what I mean? I watch like Drums by Ash Wells, Virtual Drummer. I watch everybody's. It's a cool, because it's nice. You sort of sit down on a Friday night if you've not got a lot to do, and you just sort of like build a playlist on YouTube. You watch through everything. But the thing is, because I do it on my smart TV, I tend to not put a lot of comments on now. It's like a sort of thing of I used to do it a lot on my computer. But yeah, I always sort of enjoy sitting down and watching videos. So I think I need to like get a bit more into the community side again, because I mean, it's like I met recently, is it Alice, like with the AL in brackets? Like,
oh yeah, she's a great drummer. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you
fantastic.
meet sort of people. Yeah, you meet people like that, and I met like Brian Drums. There's so many,
good one.
There's so many cool people that you come across, and you sort of think, you want to try and keep that community alive, sort of thing. It's like, so I think when I sort of get my students involved, I want them to be a part of that community as well. Because the thing is, I used to be quite into gaming, like sort of in my early 20s through to sort of mid 20s. And the trouble is with those sort of communities, they could be quite toxic and things like that. You'd get a lot of like sort of people be like that. The drumming community, because there's always this thing, like a lot of people say, oh, drummers are really arrogant. Do you know what? It's the total opposite when it comes to the drum community. Everyone's they're so friendly. Do you know what I mean? Everyone makes time for each other, and like everyone's so friendly and supportive. They always like leave comments, they share stuff. It's a really nice community to be a part of, and it's one that I'm proud for my students to down the line be a part of, where they feel that they can go up, they can put a video up, and they're not going to be chastised for like, oh, you changed a bit there, it doesn't match the like notation or something like that, or they know that they're going to be welcomed. They're going to have that thing of like, oh, you've done a really good job at that. Here's a bit of like advice on what you could do next, and hear it from another perspective. That's the thing. Whenever anyone offers advice on YouTube, it's usually like constructive. Like it's always something we think, oh, that's a really cool point, I'll take that on board. Not because they're arrogant, but because they're genuinely, they give like sort of care about what the content is. Yeah, it's a cool place to be. It really is,
That's one of the things. When we started our channel, I hadn't, Loretta or neither one of us had any idea like that there'd be this, really awesome community of other drummers. And that we would build so many cool friendships, with people. And there's so many great drummers out there that you can learn from just watching. But like you said, they're at least all the people that I've experienced tend to be very helpful. And I mean, even if they're like, a rock of God, like they're still they never come across like, let me teach you something. They're just very helpful. Like, oh, well, I've found that this helps me with, this, or, hey, how are you getting that sound? Oh yeah. Martin Bellamy in Canada is one who's
he's awesome, isn't
he? He's a great dude. He's phenomenal at the kit. But then like, I've also been like, dude, like, help me with mixing stuff. Like, what are you doing? And so he's helped me mix a couple things that I've learned from listening to him and watching him. And it's such a neat piece to the community that everybody's willing to it's not like, oh, this is my trade secret, this, and I don't want to part with this information. It's so cool. What advice would you give to anybody that's saying, hey, I'm going to start playing the drums? What would you say to them?
To be honest, it's a weird one because obviously I get that a lot with my students, especially the youngsters. Do you know what I mean? They sort of sit there and it's mainly the parents. They sort of say, right, they want to get into drums, but obviously they worry. The number one thing is the noise. So obviously you've got electric kits, acoustic. You've even got semi-acoustic kits. Like I've got a Natal DNA stealth kit for the studio. Like I guess the one with a mesh hedge. Do you know what I mean? Just simply, it's great to teach on because you can sort of drum things without it blasting out all this volume, and students can listen to you while you're actually showing a technique and things like that. So there's obviously different options there. So, but that's usually the thing. The first thing they'll say is like, right, they want to learn drums. Do we buy a drum kit first or do we have lessons? And it's a thing of like, I always say, have a couple of lessons, see how they feel, and then you can decide down the line. The best thing to do, I think, with anyone who's interested in drums is simply just to go for it, because it's like with anything in life. If you have that sort of passion for it, I mean, it's like for me, I've always had this thing where I've wanted to learn saxophone, right? And it's a thing of I've never ever done it. And there probably will be a time when I'm like 45, 50, where I'll sit there and probably think, I wish I did actually do it. Do you know what I mean? So if you do have that in you and you sort of think to yourself, do you know what, I really want to play drums? Yeah, it's just something you've got to go for. And it reminds me when Virtua Drummer said he had quite a bit of time off from drumming. I did the same thing in my 20s. I finished one of my blues bands. I had about, I think it's 2 years off. And I look back on that now. And even though it was only 2 years, which is quite a short amount of time, when you consider that in a lifetime,
right,
that's quite a lot of time. And I really regret that. Do you know what I mean? To this day, I sort of think where my drumming would have been if I wouldn't have done that, and I would have pursued it. And I remember the day I sat behind the kit again, I booked up some studio space on the Mapex, and I played it, and it was like I hadn't been away from it. And everything felt so natural, even like down to my strength and everything. It was a really strange feeling. I thought I was going to be like, get behind the kit and it feel really alien. It just didn't. I felt at home. And the good thing is with that feeling, that's instinct then. That's something that you've built over time, and that's something that lives within you. So when you've sort of got that on your side, as a musician sort of thing, if you feel, that's the best advice I can give. If you feel you want to do something, you just got to go for it. Whether it's drums, saxophone, guitar, anything like that. It's just, you have one life at the end of the day, and it goes so quick. I mean, I'm 33 this year, and it's like, and I sort of think to myself, like, how quick life does go. Do you know what I mean? The months of shooting by, to think we're already in April. Do you know what I mean? It feels like yesterday was Christmas. Yeah, that's what I mean.
True.
It's so crazy, but that's what I mean. It's like, there's a time, I mean, the way I drum, because I'm quite a heavy drummer, there's probably a chance I'll get to 50 and have crippling arthritis, but it's like, I'm enjoying life for today. Do you know what I mean? That's the way I look at it. Do you know what I mean? It's like, you got to go with what your gut says. So anyone who wants to learn drums, just go for it. Even if it's like, there's a problem with the noise, you can always get around that. Finances, you can always pick up something relatively good on Facebook Marketplace or eBay. Because that's the thing, a lot of parents will buy their kids a drum set, they'll have it for 4 or 5 months, and like they probably won't play it that much, and the parents will sell it for a fifth of the price. And you can get a good bargain. You can get some really good drum sets for quite cheap prices if you look out like around, you've only got to look at the right time. So then finances aren't always like the biggest factor. It's just, and then when you've got space as well, if you get an electric kit, they can be folded up. You get an Alesis, you can sort of like, you can pack them away. There's always a way around it with drums, I've found, and like, that's the thing, I found obviously with teaching, that can be pushed to the extremes more and more. Yeah, that's my advice, just always to anyone, if they feel they want to do it, whatever age you are. And that's the thing, like I said earlier, I've got a student who's 73. And I said, I sat down with him and I said to him, like, why do you want to learn drums? He said, just want to play drums. And sometimes that's just the answer. Do you know what I mean? Like literally, he hasn't really got any end goal with it. He only like comes along to lessons like sort of once a month, sometimes, once every other fortnight sort of thing, he'll just sort of just book a lesson in when he feels like it. But the thing is, he does that because he just wants to sort of get into it and just have like a bit of fun with it. So you don't really need to know your end goal with drums. I think that's the cool thing, as I was saying earlier, when you sort of don't have that and you just sort of like try and take life as it comes when it, with that sort of side of it, yeah, you just you can just sort of go with the flow, find out where life will take you with it. You know, you can sort of, if you feel like you want to get in a band, if you're ready, you can advertise, you know, people get in touch. You will meet some like strange people along the way who you don't gel with, and you learn by those mistakes. You know, you just
Right.
have to treat the whole process as one big learning curve. And that's one example why a lot of people say to me along the lines, you've probably heard this quite a few times, Martin would have heard it, you know, sort of any drummer on the community, and they say, who's the best drummer? And when anyone ever says that to me, it's a question I could never ever answer, because it's like, define best. It's like, when,
Mm.
you know, is Keith Moon one of the best drummers? You know, from The Who? Is like Jason Bittner from Shadows Fall one of the best drummers? Technically, he's, you know, he plays metal. He does a lot of double bass. He's more intricate. But then you've got other drummers. Do you know what I mean? Lars Ulrich from Metallica. He's best in Metallica. It's a very hard thing to define. Do you know what I mean? It's like, there's so many different musicians out there. So when people say best drummer, I tend to always steer away and just say a drummer's as good as like who they are. You're all just part of that community. And that's a very good way to look at it. Do you know what I mean? So
That's
yeah,
super good perspective on it. Yeah.
yeah,
I
because I
love that.
mean, it's like when you said about Martin Bellamy. It's like, I personally, when I watch his double bassings, I'm like some the way, because he sounds so good as well, isn't it? When his toms, like the EQ he done on it. I remember I said to him, and he's like, he went into all this like intricate stuff about how he done it, and I was like, yeah, it just sounds really good. Do you know what I mean? It's like he gets such a good sound out of his kit.
Yes.
Because I think he said it was a Gretsch, his kit, and yeah, it sounds really cool. And but he deserves like all the views he gets for what he does. But it's in the same way that like people like Alice, that I said about earlier, who's, you know, sort of quite young, like Ruby C drummer, how they sit behind their kit and they put in the work in, and they deserve their views. Do you know what I mean? It's like
Absolutely.
everyone's sort of doing, yeah, it makes them the best at what they do, you know, and they keep getting better from that. It's a really good way to look at it, I feel. You know, that's my sort of philosophy on it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And because there's the question of like drummers that influenced somebody, and then those tend to be who will gravitate to as like the best, you know, the best drummer. But you're right, like somebody else playing for Metallica wouldn't, or putting Lars like in the, you know, whatever, in the Ben Folds 5, like it wouldn't, he wouldn't be the best drummer, you know,
Yeah.
for that band, right? um but yeah, that's such a neat way to think about it. I love that. I love that. So let me ask you one more question. Speaking of
Yeah, no worries. Yeah.
who's the best drummer, no, I'm just kidding. We're gonna ask like, who are some of the drummers that influenced you early on? I know you said you have a lot of punk influences.
Yeah. So in the early days, I was quite into Metallica from about the age of 10. So I would say probably Lars Ulrich. I quite liked the Reload album by Metallica, which isn't a very popular opinion amongst people who like Metallica, but mainly because of like the Fuel like Memory Remains. I kind of liked how he used to do his fills. It had like a very sort of same feel to like the Black album. The production of the drums was always really good on that, for example, and they kind of carried that over. But yeah, I was into like Bullet for My Valentine massively, because they're a band from obviously the UK, Wales, and yeah, that was when I really got into music. So Moose Thomas from Bullet for My Valentine, he was a big sort of, because he did a lot of the double bass. It was right when emo was sort of really kicking off over here. Do you know what I mean? And yeah, there were certain songs with that where he had like the blasting on the double kicks and things. He had this really nice sounding Pearl Masters drum kit. I think it was an MCX, I think. But yeah, it was things like that that sort of got me into sort of drums, I think, as well, like listening to the sort of sounds that he could get. He was playing a lot of Metallica covers with Bullet for My Valentine as well.
Nice.
And I liked that because that sort of blended the two then. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, so I'd have said drummers like that. I was also quite a fan of like Iron Maiden, sort of like in the early days, like Nico McBrain, also Clive Burr as well, them sort of drummers. Yeah, punk for me, it's always been a love of mine, but it's sort of stemmed as my music taste has matured. So yeah, as I
Okay.
sort of found more and more bands and started playing in covers bands, it was a thing of people would like say, "Oh, you know, have you heard of Big Country?" And I was like, no, you know, like not really. And like I sort of heard a couple of their songs, and then you'd play one of their songs, and then like we Wake Up the Nation, like our singer Rob suggested doing a couple of songs by Secret Affair. And I said, yeah, okay. And you sort of like listen to the drums, how good they are and things like that, you know. And it's like with my other band prior to that, Spiral Scratch, they said, oh, we're going to do some songs by the Smiths. And do you know what? Up until the age of 27, I'd never heard a song by the Smiths, which for a person into music is quite, you know, to not really know a lot about Manchester, considering I'm into Oasis and things like that. Same went for Stone Roses as well. And but they played like a couple of songs by the Smiths, and I like really got into them. So that's the kind of thing with it. Like you sort of then appreciate how those drummers add that own flavor to it. So for me, my influences are always growing. And like I said, I never necessarily have like a favorite drummer, but it's always a thing of, as one of my students was saying today, or one of the parents actually was saying, like, they said, oh, ever since they started having lessons, it's always a thing now when we're in the car and we're listening to the radio, it's always a thing that we hear like the drums so much more, because like you get the son's like sitting there drumming like that to the rhythm. And that's the thing. It's like it shows just how important the drums are, even though in most songs they're obviously a backline, especially radio songs and things like that. You know, the drums tend to sort of be in the background. There's like that hierarchy where you'd have bass, guitar, and vocals on top. So it's kind of cool when people then flip it on its head. It's like when people say, right, listen to the bass in that song. People are like, huh? Do you know what I mean? It's like, but then you take that bass out. Yeah, you take it out though, and you'd certainly notice it. Do you know what I mean? Exactly the same with the drums. It's so important. Right. So yeah, when you sort of look at it like that, yeah. In terms of influences, the drums for me, when I started getting into it back in sort of like when I was 14, 15, like 2004, 2005 time, yeah, it was a thing of I never really appreciated the drums. And then I'd listen to something like Iron Maiden's The Wicker Man. And you'd actually listen to like at the start, you know, and you'd hear like Nico McBrain doing like that single bass, like constant driving in the chorus. And you'd be listening to it and you think, God, that sounds really powerful. And you'd then notice it more because you were getting into drums. So you'd notice how the drums were actually filling out that sound.
Right.
Yeah. So that's when the influences for me started to grow. Do you know what I mean? You'd start to then appreciate the drummers more. So, yeah, that's just sort of always followed my career, to be fair. You know, the more I've got into drums, the more you sort of really appreciate what the drummers do. Yeah. I mentioned Jason Bittner earlier as well from Shadows Fall. He's a great drummer. Do you know what I mean? Some drummers just do so much and make it work. And it's like, yeah, it's surprising what boundaries can be pushed as well. That's what's cool. You know, you can have a drummer like Ringo Starr, and then you can have a drummer like Jason Bittner, and it's like you both put them in the same room and they can do both different things, but they're their own sort of drummer. Yeah, it's amazing how that art, how it can work, isn't it? Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, it's true. That's true. Very different, you know, and everybody's bringing their own thing to the table.
Definitely.
You know, you and I playing the same song that would have a different feel to it, because you're going to bring your sensibilities and your influences to it, and I'm going to do the same. And that's kind of, I think, what's so neat about music and art in general, you know, is it's subjective as a viewer or as a hearer, and it's even subjective in terms of who are the players, you know, in that. It's going to sound different with different musicians. Even the same notes, you know, are going to...
It's weird, isn't it? Yeah, it really
it's crazy.
Is,
yeah. It's crazy.
That's what, I was going to say, that's why I'm like interested to see Virtual Drummer, because he literally, you know, he doesn't live too far from me, and he gigs at a lot of venues I used to gig at in the past. And like whenever he puts like stuff on Instagram, I'm like, oh, you know, shame I'm working. I'd like go and see him, you know. And but that's the thing, because he's like, I like watching his drumming because, you know, he's got a real passion for it and things like that. And when you're sort of watching him play live and things, because he's like filming it all properly and everything. Yeah, I just really like how he does it. It's just great to sort of have that community where everyone just sort of gets on and and just to sort of see, like, especially Instagram as well. I only got that last year. I thought, what's the point of having Instagram? Like, you know, I thought it's all, you know, pictures. No one's going to care about pictures of drums. And then like literally I got it, and then just like all these followers. I was like, oh, everyone's on it. Yeah, and it's like it's been great, you know, especially because you can do reels and things like that now as well. And like, you know, I notice a lot of people are getting a lot of well-deserved views. I noticed you did with your custom drums. Like when you put one up and you're like overnight, wasn't it like 15,000 views you had or something?
There was one, we did do a promo thing on YouTube. And that promo one I threw money at too. you know,
Oh,
like
right, okay.
to try to just get it out there. But then I was like, you know what? We got a lot of views, but we didn't get a lot of response to it, you know, like, and so it's like I kind of step back and try to do it more organically in
Yeah.
terms of the business, and like, you know, using the right hashtags. You know, we've got a handful of wonderful artists that are using our drums, and so they're sharing their stuff and they're sharing our posts, and so we're kind of trying to grow it that way. But
Yeah.
shorts have been a great tool for both the company and for the channel,
Oh,
in
that's
terms
cool.
of
Yeah.
growing it, because you get, I mean, it varies, right? You know, but you can get several thousand views in a short time, and usually I found that we'll pick up 4 or 5 subscribers in a day, you know,
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
because of a short. So but then I just try to find stuff that I could easily make a lot of, you know, in a short period of
Yeah.
time, and then just put them up and then forget about it for a month and then go, okay, back to the beginning. But yeah, man, I have really enjoyed our chat, and I want to thank you
No, it's
so
been
much
great. Yeah.
for
Because
hanging out.
because that's what I wanted to say. It's been cool for me, obviously, because like, when I started YouTube back in, I mean, I made my channel 2019. So of course, the first proper shout outs I got on my channel were Rich Raw Dog and also yourself. And yeah, it
Awesome.
was really early days for me. So of course, like, yeah, because you've always been like a central part of my channel, like to have that from the early days, sort of thing. So of course, when like I always recommend your channel, I say, "Oh, it's Eric." Yeah, like I know him from like back when I started my channel. So it's kind of like bizarre to be chatting to you today, like sort of 3 years on. It's a really cool
Same.
sort of, yeah, to
Yeah,
have this
because
interview. Yeah, it's been
we've
really
kind of
good. Yeah,
kept tabs on what each other have been
yeah,
doing, and so to finally sit down and have a proper connection is super cool. Well, you guys, I want you to head
yeah.
over to Taison Wade's channel. I'm going to put a link to that. I'm going to put a link to his social medias, and you can go follow him, subscribe. You'll learn something. You'll really enjoy it. Not only is he a phenomenal musician, he's a fantastic human being. It's been a joy to kind of get to know him through the social medias over the last few years, and then to finally sit down, a long overdue, sit down and chat today. So thank you again so much, brother.
Yeah, cheers. That's been really good. I really enjoyed it. So yeah.
Excellent. Well, you guys, again, follow, sub, links in the description below. We will see you next time.